Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get?
That's why I put down the gun. I could have kept going. There was no officers there to stop me.
Around midnight, he allegedly sneaked into his mom's room and strangled her. Then he went to get a wheelbarrow to bring the body out of the house.
From robberies to homicides, these teenagers have faced the legal system and now stand before the reality of spending the rest of their lives behind bars. Watch as they confront the weight of their decisions, revealing raw emotions and intense reactions to their life sentences.
That's why I put down the gun. I could have kept going. There was no officers there to stop me. I put it down because there was a girl there. She didn't run from me. She just, I shot through the door. I could have shot her, but I don't know.
Before embarking on his deadly mission, Sky Boucher meticulously planned every detail. Sky placed his shotgun into his guitar case. He then took 2 Phenibut, a psychoactive substance banned in the United States but available online. Additionally, Sky placed a tactical vest in his backpack and approached Forest High School. When Sky arrived at Forest High School, he saw a teenage girl walking by. However, instead of pulling the trigger, he hesitated. This unexpected moment of clarity may have prevented a more devastating outcome. Instead of targeting innocent lives, Sky fired his weapon through a classroom door, striking a student in the ankle. Minutes after firing the shotgun, Sky was arrested by a school resource officer. As the police approached, Sky had his hands up and surrendered, claiming he had a mental illness. Sky's motive behind the chilling act was to inflict fear in students, according to his statements. He claimed that he never intended to kill anyone, but rather wanted to terrorize the school population.
Watch your back. Did you intend on shooting anybody else?
Why today?
According to Sky, he had nightmares that prompted him to plan and perform the shooting. These disturbing dreams fueled his desire to take action and carry out a violent act. Sky admitted that he wanted to go to jail. He believed that being incarcerated would prevent him from committing another shooting in the future, fearing that he could be a danger to himself or others.
I put it in a guitar case, and I also had a tactical vest filled with shotgun slug rounds.
Sky admitted that he purchased the gun 1 week after the Marjorie Stoneman High School shooting in Parkland. This private cash sale did not require a background check. He was charged with terrorism, aggravated assault with a firearm, carrying a concealed weapon, and armed trespass on school property.
What do you have to say to people who are out there who are scared because of what you did today?
I don't know if it's going to make it any better. I could say sorry all I want, but it doesn't matter now.
Faced with the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence, Sky decided to plead no contest, resulting in a 30-year sentence with an additional 30 years of probation. During the sentencing hearing, Sky's grandmother, Linda Costello, was allowed to make a statement on his behalf. Speaking via Zoom, she described her grandson as a nice person and expressed her remorse for his actions. According to Linda, Sky had expressed a desire to make a positive impact in the community by sharing his story and urging other teenagers to stay away from illegal substances purchased over the internet.
It's a probable cause to hold you on the charges that have been made. I'm here to see about getting you some representation by an attorney.
While Sky Boucher's actions may have stopped short of murder, the case of 15-year-old Gregory Ramos serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity.
Around midnight, he allegedly sneaked into his mom's room and strangled her. Then he went to get a wheelbarrow to bring the body out of the house.
Gail Clevenger, a deeply religious woman, was known for her sweet, kind nature and ability to get along well with everyone. In 2018, Gail's son Gregory reached 15 and began attending University High School. Gail would drive Gregory to school each day, but behind the facade of a seemingly innocent teenager, there was a diabolical plot brewing. In November of 2018, everything took a tragic turn. Gregory returned home to find his mother, Gail, waiting for him. An argument soon began, with Gail expressing her disappointment over a D grade he had received in class. Like any teenager, Gregory ran to his room and slammed the door. However, Gregory was plotting something sinister behind that closed door. At midnight, he emerged from his room and walked towards his mother, who was sound asleep. Gregory placed his hands around Gail's neck and strangled her. Gregory believed that he had successfully killed his mother when he left her bedroom and headed to the backyard. He got a wheelbarrow, thinking it would be the perfect tool to transport the body. As Gregory returned to his mother's bedroom, he found that she was still breathing, leaving him with no choice but to continue his deadly assault. Finally, Gregory felt his mother's last breath. Relief washed over him. He cautiously approached the body, confirming for himself that she was no longer alive. Gregory then placed her body in the wheelbarrow and loaded it into the family car. Gregory left DeBerry and headed towards Daytona Beach. However, he quickly realized he had forgotten a shovel and turned around midway through the ride to retrieve it. As he returned home, Gregory called two of his friends. Together, they planned to hide electronic and valuable items from Gregory's house to make the scene look like a burglary. After hiding the items, he transported his mother's body to River City Church. There, he buried his mother's body beneath a fire pit. Following these heinous crimes, Gregory calmly went to a Circle K store, where he purchased soda as if nothing had happened. The following morning, Gregory went to school. However, when he returned home, he called 911, reporting a robbery. When the police arrived, Gregory explained that his mother was missing, but her car was still in the driveway.
Checked the entire house because I was looking for her, but she's not here. I just got home, and my house is completely trashed.
Initially, the police believed Gregory's story that he was worried for his mother's safety. However, as the investigation unfolded, the case details raised suspicions and led to the discovery of the tragic truth. As detectives dug deeper, they noticed inconsistencies in Gregory's story. Despite claiming to be a concerned son, there were discrepancies. The detectives grew suspicious of Gregory's involvement in the crime.
He called police and claimed there had been a break-in at the house and his mom was missing. This is police body cam video.
As the questioning continued, Gregory's statements became more incriminating. He eventually admitted to murdering his mother and implicated his two friends who helped him cover up the crime. Gregory revealed that he had planned and executed the murder with the help of his friends on May 31, 2019. After Gregory admitted to killing his mother and disposing of her body at the church, investigators headed there, where they uncovered Gail's remains. In addition to uncovering Gail's remains, investigators also seized several items from around the fire pit. A shovel and broom, seemingly used to assist in burying the body, were carefully collected as evidence. Following Gregory's confession and the successful recovery of Gail's remains, the Volusia County Sheriff's Office swiftly moved to bring charges against him. Gregory was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a dead body, and tampering with evidence. Despite being 15, Gregory was charged as an adult due to the severity of his crimes.
It's the murder case shocking America. A 15-year-old confesses to strangling his mom over a bad grade.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood addressed the media, expressing his outrage at Gregory's heinous crime. Sheriff Chitwood called Gregory a soulless individual who believed himself to be the smartest person in the room. According to Sheriff Chitwood, Gregory even went so far as to express his belief that he deserved an award for his skillful performance in reporting his mother missing during a 911 call. In January 2021, Gregory accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. During the sentencing hearing, the judge granted Gregory an opportunity for parole after he served 25 years in prison. His attorney expressed hope that Gregory would use his time in prison to reflect upon his actions and work towards becoming a productive citizen.
A Volusia County teen accused of murdering his mother, Gregory Ramos, has pleaded guilty more than 2 years after detectives say the then 15-year-old strangled his mother to death over a fight.
One of the most poignant moments of the hearing came when Gregory's 84-year-old grandmother, who was also the victim's mother, was granted the opportunity to confront him face to face. This moment was a bittersweet reunion, as the older woman expressed her unwavering support for her grandson, despite her deep sense of loss. Even though she lost her daughter, she expressed her hope for Gregory's future, and assured him that she would always be there for him. Gregory expressed remorse for his actions and apologized to his family. However, his words did little to alleviate the pain and loss felt by his family. He acknowledged the severity of his actions and admitted that he was not making excuses for himself. In contrast to Gregory Ramos, who killed his mother after a heated argument, Russell Burrell, at just 16 years old, carried out a premeditated attack on strangers, leaving 3 people dead.
He intended to rob them when he and 3 others burst into the General Street apartment and shot the victims. He faces up to 6 consecutive life sentences.
One fateful night, 17-year-old Russell Burrell and 3 of his friends found themselves in an apartment where they hatched a plan to commit burglary. Their target was a man named Michael Martin, whom they believed to be an easy target with potential access to marijuana and money. Their decision to rob Michael would lead to a series of events that would change their lives forever.
Not guilty to all counts, Your Honor.
At approximately 10 p.m., Russell, armed with a fully loaded 9mm Glock pistol equipped with a 17-round magazine and a red laser sight beam, led his friends to Michael Martin's residence. When Michael answered the door, Russell and his companions aggressively commanded him into the living room. Russell's actions escalated rapidly as he and his friends entered the apartment. In the living room, Russell confronted Michael and another man, Damian Colin, who happened to be in the apartment. Without hesitation, Russell opened fire on both men, killing them instantly. As the bullets rained down, Shamika Barrows, who had been asleep on the couch, woke up to the terrifying scene unfolding before her. Realizing that Shamika was also in the apartment, Russell turned his sights on her. In a moment of sheer terror, Shamika watched in disbelief as Russell emptied the remaining clips of his 9mm into her. Shamika died instantly.
At 6, we're learning more about one of those victims' final moments. Eyewitness News reporter Sean Daly joins us now live outside Providence Superior Court.
It wasn't long after the triple murders that Russell and the 3 other men were caught. Russell Burrell was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of discharging a firearm during the commission of a crime of violence, and 1 count of conspiracy. Due to the severity of his crimes, Russell faced charges as an adult.
After the group agreed to commit the robbery with the gun, Russell Burrell armed himself with this black 9mm handgun.
After a lengthy legal process, Russell eventually pleaded guilty to all counts. The Attorney General, Peter Kilmartin, described Russell's actions as hard to imagine, considering his age and the absence of remorse. However, Peter Kilmartin emphasized that Russell's actions were not the result of misguided youth, but rather a cold-hearted killer. Russell sat stoic and silent as his sentence was read to him, showing little reaction. The judge described Russell as a cold-blooded, pitiless slayer. Continuing, the judge said, "You became a thing and a hoodlum, and now you're a murderer, a 3-time killer. You deserve absolutely no leniency from this court." After that, the judge dismissed Russell's appeal for leniency. At Russell's sentencing, Peter Kilmartin assured the community that Russell would no longer threaten society. Russell was sentenced to life in prison for each of the first-degree murder charges to be served consecutively. Additionally, he received a life sentence for each of the firearm charges to run concurrently. Unlike Russell Burrell's random shooting spree, the case of Brian Draper and Troy Adamczyk involved deep betrayal and twisted motivations.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get?
Brian Lee Draper attended Pocatello High School and bonded closely with his best friend, Troy Adamczyk. Brian and Troy shared a passion for movies and aspirations of pursuing careers in the film industry. This common interest brought them closer, and they often collaborated on creating their videos. On September 22, 2006, Cassie Stoddard, a classmate and friend of Brian and Tony, was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle. With their permission, she invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, to hang out that night. Brian and Troy arrived at Cassie's aunt and uncle's house as the night progressed. However, Brian and Troy got up unexpectedly and left, telling Cassie and Matt they were heading to the movie theater.
Hello, Cassie. I'm getting you on tape, okay? Say hi, please. Okay, see ya.
Little did Cassie know that Brian and Troy, her 2 supposedly trusted friends, had sinister plans in mind. Before they left, Brian, unbeknownst to Cassie, unlocked the basement door, setting the scene for a horrifying turn of events. Brian and Troy parked their car down the street dressed in dark clothes, gloves, and scary masks, and returned to Cassie's aunt and uncle's house. After Matt left Cassie's aunt and uncle's house, Brian and Troy seized the opportunity. They turned the circuit breaker off, hoping Cassie would come downstairs and flip the switch, leading her into a trap. However, Cassie remained upstairs. As Cassie remained upstairs, unaware of the danger awaiting her, Brian and Troy silently made their way up the creaking basement stairs. Armed with a dagger and hunting knife, they confronted Cassie in the living room. Brian and Troy stabbed her over 30 times. The investigation into Cassie's murder quickly focused on Brian and Troy, and as investigators gathered evidence, they discovered a partially burned VHS tape. Upon closer examination, it revealed that Brian and Troy had meticulously documented their plans to murder Cassie.
Good luck. Hopefully you don't have to get through 8 or 9 failures like we have.
Yeah, we've probably tried maybe 10 times.
Brian and Troy were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for Cassie's murder. In 2007, Brian and Troy went on trial for their heinous crime. According to the prosecution, Brian was deeply influenced by the infamous Columbine shooters, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. The prosecution argued that Troy murdered Cassie because he was obsessed with the horror movie Scream. From the gruesome depiction of the stab wounds inflicted upon her to the disturbing footage of their well-planned and executed murder, every detail presented at the trials painted a chilling picture of their sadistic nature. The medical examiner's testimony revealed the extent of the brutality inflicted upon Cassie Stoddart. He described multiple stab wounds, including deep lacerations to her neck, chest, and abdomen. Throughout the trial, Brian and Troy sat silently, in stark contrast to the boisterous demeanor they had displayed in their videos, where they excitedly talked about Cassie's murder. Their once cocky smiles were replaced by anxious glances and shifting in their seats. It was evident that they were deeply scared of the potential consequences they faced. The change in their behavior was striking. They seemed like completely different individuals, a far cry from the boisterous teenagers who had bragged about their exploits in the video. Their body language and demeanor betrayed their true selves, scared little boys who were now facing the consequences of their actions. Despite their efforts, Brian and Troy were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. With Brian Lee Draper's case behind us, the tension only builds. Now we turn to Sierra Halseth, a teen whose shocking actions left the courtroom reeling.
They look like young sweethearts just goofing around until this chilling boast.
Day 3 after murdering somebody.
Whoa! Don't put that on the camera.
They admit to committing a murder.
Sierra was the youngest child born to Daniel and Elizabeth Halseth. In 2006, Sierra's mother, Elizabeth, became involved in local politics, and several years later, she won a seat in the Nevada State Senate. Eventually, Elizabeth and Daniel separated, and Sierra moved to Alaska with her mother. However, she returned to Nevada and formed a relationship with her father. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in June 2020, Sierra was in a difficult situation. The teenager refused to return to her mother and stepfather's home, claiming she feared her stepfather. Things quickly escalated, and Sierra defied a court order to run away to her father's house. Sierra's defiance escalated, and her relationship with her father, Daniel, became strained. Daniel, a loving parent, tried his best to support his daughter, but she refused to listen. Despite Daniel's efforts to maintain a positive relationship, Sierra's behavior grew more rebellious and defiant. As time went on, Sierra's behavior took a darker turn. She began associating with an 18-year-old man named Aaron Guerrero. Despite his age, Sierra fell deeply in love with the young man. However, her father, aware of the potential dangers of such an age gap, banned her from having contact with Aaron. With their love for one another burning strong, Sierra and Aaron devised a plan to be together. They decided they could only be together by eliminating Daniel from their lives. On April 8, 2021, they shopped for gloves, bleach, and saws, effectively creating a murder kit. The following morning, when Daniel's mother was unable to contact him, she sent a friend to perform a welfare check on him. Little did she know that this check would uncover the devastating truth. When the friend arrived at Daniel's home, they found the front door unlocked, and upon entering, discovered Daniel's lifeless body. An autopsy would later determine that Daniel had been stabbed over 70 times. When crime scene investigators arrived at the scene, they discovered knives in the kitchen sink and a chainsaw on the living room floor. 4 days after the murder, Sierra and her boyfriend Aaron were tracked down and apprehended in Utah. Upon examining their phones, investigators discovered a video of the two laughing about killing Sierra's father. This chilling footage served as damning evidence against them, confirming their guilt in the minds of investigators. Sierra and Aaron were both arrested and charged with Daniel's murder. During their interrogation, Aaron admitted that he and Sierra had plotted to carry out the murder because Sierra said her father was abusive. However, Daniel's loved ones adamantly denied claims that Daniel had ever mistreated his daughter. In May 2022, Sierra and Aaron pleaded guilty to murder and a slew of other charges related to the murder. During the sentencing hearing, Aaron apologized for his actions, expressing regret for the pain and loss he had caused. However, Sierra remained silent, choosing not to address the heinous crime she had committed. The judge sentenced Sierra and Aaron to 22 years to life in prison. Sierra is serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Facility in Nevada. If you thought that one murdering teenage girl was madness, prepare yourself for the chilling tale of identical twins who joined forces to unleash double the trouble on their unsuspecting mother.
Twins share everything: birthdays, clothing, even DNA. But Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead also share a dark past.
Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead are identical twins to Jarmeka Yvonne Nikki Whitehead. Due to their mother's absence, these twins were raised by their great-grandmother. Despite the lack of parental guidance, Jasmia and Tasmia were academically successful, being honor roll students and Girl Scouts. However, their harmonious upbringing was disrupted when their mother sought custody in 2007. The relationship between Nikki and her twin daughters turned sour as conflicts arose over Nikki's attempts to assert control in their lives. The twins, feeling resentment towards their mother, expressed their dissatisfaction through physical confrontations. As a result, they found themselves seeking counseling together as a family. Eventually, the court intervened, granting custody of the twins back to their great-grandmother. However, this temporary arrangement only lasted a few weeks, as the court decided to hand custody back to Nikki on a 2-week trial basis. On January 13, 2010, several days after Jasmia and Tasmia returned to Nikki's care, the girls called 911 and reported they found their mother dead. Nikki had been beaten with a vase and stabbed several times. Initially, the police treated Jasmia and Tasmia as victims. The medical examiner called Nikki's murder a crime of passion due to how brutal it was and felt whoever killed her was not a stranger. After Nikki's murder, the detectives investigated her boyfriend as a suspect. However, he was ultimately cleared through DNA testing. It wasn't long into the investigation of Nikki's murder that Jasmia and Tasmia's lie unraveled. Bite marks and other injuries on the girls' bodies implicated them in their mother's murder. The twins began to tell the truth and said their mother, Nikki, threatened them with a pot on the stove, and a fight ensued. Jasmia admitted to breaking a vase over her mother's head, while Tasmia said she used the pot to attack her mother. They explained that their mother, who had a knife, started to stab them. As the assault on Nikki continued, her twin daughters overpowered her and dragged her to the bathtub, where she ultimately died. On May 21, 2010, Jasmia and Tasmia were charged with murder. Everyone was shocked that such innocent-looking twin teenage girls could commit a crime as horrific as what happened, especially to their mother. The type of murder that the twins committed is called matricide. Matricide refers to the act of murdering one's mother. It is a particularly heinous crime. In 2014, Tasmia pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, making false statements and possession of a knife during a crime. The judge sentenced Tasmia to 30 years in prison and is currently serving her sentence in Arundel State Prison. 1 month later, Jasmia pleaded guilty to the same charges as her twin sister, and she is also serving her 30-year sentence in Pulaski State Prison. Teenage girls are often confronted with the weight of their future, but occasionally make one poor choice with devastating consequences. This next case exemplifies how such a misstep can swiftly unravel a promising destiny.
Just a year and a half ago, this high school band called Undecided was rocking the summer festival in Ann Arbor. Everything was looking up for them and lead singer Sam Griggs.
Samantha Griggs was an 18-year-old senior at Saline High School in Michigan when she found herself involved in a tragic incident that resulted in the murder of a 19-year-old man. The fateful night began in February 2014 when Samantha, accompanied by 2 of her friends, Brendan Heim and Tyrell Braderners, drove to East Lansing, Michigan to meet Dustin Froka for a drug deal. However, their true intentions were to rob Dustin. Driven to gain quick money, Samantha agreed to serve as a getaway driver. As the trio approached East Lansing, they encountered Dustin, who willingly entered Samantha's Ford Explorer. Dustin was a student at Michigan State University. He studied marketing, was an up-and-coming rapper, and was the father of a 10-month-old daughter. However, at the time, Dustin was struggling with substance abuse. People who knew Dustin spoke to reporters with the Lansing State Journal and said that despite signing to a record label, he had been on a downward spiral since the fall. Unbeknownst to Dustin, his fate was already sealed when he entered Samantha Griggs' Ford Explorer. During the drive, the 2 teenage boys in the back seat with Dustin started to beat him, causing multiple skull fractures with brass knuckles. The violence escalated quickly, fueled by anger and greed. To escape, Dustin jumped out of the car, traveling up to 45 to 60 miles per hour. Unfortunately, his desperate attempt to escape ended in tragedy. After the incident, Dustin's lifeless body was discovered along the interstate. The Michigan State Police were called in to investigate, and a search quickly led to the discovery of Samantha, Brendan, and Tyrell, who were arrested and charged with Dustin's murder. Instead of heading off to Eastern Michigan University as she was supposed to after graduation from high school, Samantha was sentenced to between 6 and 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to manslaughter and unarmed robbery charges. During the sentencing hearing, Samantha expressed remorse and apologized for her actions. She tearfully claimed that she had never intended for harm to come to Dustin and that she believed he would only experience a robbery. However, Dustin's stepsister denied these claims, stating that Samantha lacked morals and consciousness. Dustin's stepmother agreed, emphasizing that Samantha had several opportunities to prevent Dustin's murder from happening, but never did. As these statements were made, Samantha nodded in agreement, wiping away tears as she stared at the defense table. Before being convicted of Dustin's murder, Samantha had a clean criminal record, and she was a promising musician with a promising future laid out before her. However, her actions had tragically altered the course of her life forever. As we close the chapter on Samantha Griggs' case, the intensity continues. Next up is Dexter Johnson, whose crimes pushed the boundaries of brutality and stunned the court.
Dexter Darnell Johnson, the jury has found you guilty of capital murder. In accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, this court hereby assesses your punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
In the early hours of Sunday, June 18, 2006, in Harris County, Texas, 5 young adults were riding in a black Nissan Sentra looking for someone to rob. They were Ashley Irvin, her brother, Lewis Irvin, Keith Ron Fields, Timothy Randall, and newly turned 18-year-old Dexter Darnell Johnson. After minutes of scanning the area, they came across a parked blue Toyota Matrix, which had 2 people sitting inside. 23-year-old Maria Aparici and her 17-year-old boyfriend, Hui No. Johnson swiftly left the vehicle and approached the blue Toyota while holding a shotgun. On getting there, he stood outside the driver's door and threatened to shoot the passengers if they didn't cooperate. Little did they know that their fate had already been sealed. Following the threats by Dexter Johnson, Maria Aparici and Hui No decided to comply and made their way to the back seat of the Toyota, where they were joined by Lewis Irvin, while Fields climbed into the passenger seat, which had been vacated. Johnson then started the Toyota and began driving around the block as he asked for money, while Ashley and Randall followed behind in their vehicle. Eventually, both vehicles stopped near a wooded area. Then Fields forced No out of the Toyota and held a gun to his head while Johnson up Parisi right there in the car. After Johnson finished, he and Fields marched the couple into the woods and shot each of them in the head before driving back to their apartment as Randall and the Irvins followed behind. They even used Aparisi's credit card to purchase gas for both vehicles on their way back. 2 days later, on the 20th of June 2006, Fields' mom, Felicia Williams, called the Humble Police Department to inform them about 3 suspicious vehicles which were parked in the parking lot of her apartment complex. Officers responded to the call and discovered that all 3 vehicles had been reported as stolen, including a blue Toyota Matrix. The next day, the mother of the 14-year-old girl also called the attention of the police department after she failed to return home past her curfew. When the officers arrived, the girl had returned, and on further questioning, they found out that she had been with Johnson earlier that day. The police officers headed to Williams' apartment and found Johnson smoking and in possession of some marijuana. They also found a shotgun under one of the beds, which Johnson admitted to owning. As a result, Johnson was arrested for possession of marijuana, and his shotgun was also confiscated. Around this time, Aparisi's father had already reported her disappearance to various police departments. When Everett Hargrave, a detective in charge of the investigation, became aware of the blue matrix recovered in Humble, the dots began to connect. No's family had also reported his disappearance, and Aparisi's father reported the use of her credit cards, so the detective went on a search for more clues and was able to access footage which showed 2 black males using the credit card at a Walmart in Humble. Johnson, who was still in custody, was called in for questioning and initially denied the allegations. However, Hargrave didn't buy the lies and instructed the Harris County District Attorney's Office to charge him with aggravated robbery. Johnson was also transferred to the Harris County Jail on the same day. On the 23rd of June, Randall was also arrested and interrogated, and he eventually ended up showing the officers where the bodies of Aparisi and Nyo were. Around that time, the Irvins were also arrested and questioned. That evening, Johnson was transferred to the Houston Police Department's Homicide Division, where he was questioned and admitted to Aparici, but denied shooting the couple with his shotgun. By the time Johnson and all 4 of his accomplices had been interrogated, it was alleged that the deaths of Aparici and Nyo were part of a 25-day crime spree perpetrated by the crew, which resulted in 5 deaths. For his alleged role in the murders, Johnson was charged with 2 counts of manslaughter and sentenced to death in 2007. Johnson looked pretty disappointed on hearing the sentence as he fell deeply into his seat in confusion.
Your punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
Following over a decade on death row, his execution was initially set for the 2nd of May 2019, but it was postponed 90 days to the 15th of August due to issues with his lawyers. However, a day before the new execution date, the Court of Appeal decided to stay the execution with a ruling that permitted Johnson to litigate his claim that he was ineligible for the death penalty due to an intellectual disability, as he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Today, Johnson, who is now 36, remains in custody and awaits a final verdict on his case. But this next teenager wasn't so lucky.
Shane Bargo Jr. should be sentenced to death, yes.
Michael Bargo holds his head after hearing he is sentenced to death for the 2nd time on Tuesday.
On the night of April 17, 2011, 18-year-old Michael Shane Bargo and 4 of his friends, Amber Wright, Kyle Hooper, Charlie Ellie, and Justin Soto, schemed in the gruesome murder of 15-year-old Seth Jackson. The motive? A toxic mix of youthful recklessness, jealousy, and spite. Seth Jackson had dated Amber Wright for just over 3 months before the couple had a bitter breakup in March 2011. After the breakup, Wright became romantically involved with Michael Bargo, but continued to send text messages to Jackson. This obviously made Bargo jealous when he found out. For weeks leading up to his murder, Jackson was repeatedly threatened by Bargo, including cases at Wright's home and one at his own home, with his mother reportedly once hearing Bargo tell her son that he had a bullet with his name on it. During that same period, Ellie, who lived in a 2-bedroom home in Summerfield, Florida, had allowed some of her friends, including Bargo and Hooper, to move in with her. On the day of the murder, Bargo assembled his roommates, first informing Hooper, who had apparently lost a love interest to Jackson, that he wanted to make a plan to murder Jackson. Later that afternoon, Bargo got Wright to use text messages to lure Jackson over to Ellie's home, with the plan being to ambush him once he got into the apartment. Jackson was initially skeptical about Wright's texts, but decided to go visit anyway, despite the warnings of his close friend, William Samalot. After arriving at Ellie's home, Jackson sat down waiting to speak with Wright before Hooper, who was in one of the rooms, grabbed a wooden object, then ran into the living room, where he delivered a blow to the blindsided Jackson. Bargo, who followed closely behind, then shot at Jackson, who managed to survive the initial rain of bullets, and ran out the door. However, Jackson didn't make it very far before he was tackled by Soto and shot at by Bargo once again. The 2 boys then beat him up further before his almost lifeless body was carried back into the apartment and put in a bathtub. Bargo's plan was to make sure that the last face Jackson would ever see before his death would be his, and he made sure of this by delivering the final shot to Jackson's face. Bargo and Soto disposed of Jackson's lifeless body, putting it into a sleeping bag and burning it in Ellie's fire pit. The following morning, Wright's stepdad, James Havens, arrived at Ellie's home to help dispose of Jackson's remains, which he dumped at a remote water-filled rock quarry. The following day, police arrived in the neighborhood to investigate the reported disappearance of Jackson. Bargo had to stay away, and Havens tried to help by sending him to stay with the family of his girlfriend, Kristen Williams. However, despite not knowing the Williams, Bargo told basically everyone that cared to listen what he had done, with subtle twists to the story. On the 19th of April 2011, law enforcement finally arrived at the Williams home and took Bargo into custody. Even after his arrest, Bargo continued to tell on himself, informing a fellow inmate of what he had done. After the police obtained multiple search warrants, his revolver was also found in Ellie's home, with the box found in his grandmother's home. The fire pit in Ellie's home was also discovered to contain possible human remains. Jackson's remains were eventually found underwater beneath the Ocala quarry, and his DNA was strongly matched to that of the missing person they were looking for. Despite all of his prior comments linking himself to the murder, Bargo initially denied his involvement when interrogated in court, claiming that he had only participated in disposing of Jackson's body and suggesting that Hooper may have done the deed and implicating the rest of his friend group. Despite his attempts to retell the story during his trial, Bargo was eventually charged with first-degree murder with a firearm and was found guilty in August 2013 by a jury who overwhelmingly recommended that he be sentenced to death, despite family and friends testifying in his favor.
The defendant is guilty of murder of the first degree with a firearm, as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated this 20th day of August 2015.
Bargo's attorneys appealed the verdict, claiming that there was insufficient evidence and that Bargo had been deprived of a fair trial amongst other arguments in his case. The Florida Supreme Court eventually ordered a new sentencing hearing because the jury recommendation wasn't unanimous, being a 10-2 verdict. However, it eventually became unanimous in the resentencing on September 12, 2019, and Bargo was set to face the death penalty.
Should be sentenced to death, yes.
Michael Bargo holds his head after hearing he is sentenced to death for the second time on Tuesday.
Now 31, Bargo is currently spending his last days at the Union Correctional Institution. While Bargo is on death row for murdering a supposed foe, this next teenager suffered the same fate for literally backstabbing his own friend.
The sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Myers on the charge of aggravated murder.
Myers once again showed no emotion.
On the 28th of January 2014, Justin Back, an 18-year-old, was murdered in Waynesville, Warren County, Ohio, by two young men who had broken into his family home to steal a safe from the house. Those two men were Timothy Mosley and 19-year-old Austin Myers, whose evil plans ruined not just the life of an innocent boy and his family, but also theirs. Back was childhood friends with Myers when they were in middle school, as they both attended the same high school. He only graduated high school in 2013 and had plans to join the U.S. Navy. However, his dream would be cut short by a man he used to call his friend. On the day before Back's murder, Myers suggested a plan to make a quick buck to Mosley. The plan was to commit a robbery, and there were two potential targets, a substance dealer or Back's stepfather, Mark Cates. Myers was aware from his friendship with Back that Cates had a safe in his family home where he potentially kept thousands of dollars and a gun. Mosley agreed to Myers' plan to rob Cates, and both young men drove to Back's home with intentions to break into the safe. However, on getting there, they realized that Back was home, so they made a new plan, this time to murder Back, cart away with the safe, and make it seem like Back had stolen the safe and run away from home. Myers bought a 3-foot-length steel cable and fastened it into a choke wire. The next morning, Myers and Mosley purchased various chemicals and rubber gloves in anticipation of having to dispose of a body. The pair drove to Back's home that afternoon with the intention of catching him off guard with the choke wire. Oblivious to their plans, Back let them into the house, and all three men had a short discussion before they finally had their moment to strike. Mosley saw a chance to attack Back from behind with the choke wire. However, Back fought back, and in the resulting scuffle involving all three men, Mosley had to stab Back from behind before Myers continued choking him. Mosley continued to stab Back around the chest area until he was finally dead. Myers and Mosley cleaned up the kitchen where they killed Back before wrapping his body in a blanket and throwing it into the trunk of Mosley's car. The young men eventually decided to hide the body in a field and poured on some of the chemicals to speed up decomposition of the body. Myers and Mosley headed back to Back's place for one last attempt at the safe, but once they opened it, they found out there was only loose change and some random items inside. Cates came home to find his home trashed and quickly contacted the police. He also couldn't find Back despite finding his phone in the house, so he knew something was wrong. This was confirmed when the police described sighting a car which Myers had used to visit Back the previous day. Myers was eventually found, detained and questioned, but he denied having anything to do with Back's disappearance or the burglary. Mosley was also questioned and initially denied the allegations. However, at a second round of interrogations, Myers tried to implicate Mosley, who, upon hearing the false confession, decided to tell the truth. Back's body was eventually found, and it was determined that he had died of the multiple stab wounds, and both Myers and Mosley were accused of having a direct role in his murder. Myers was charged with 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count each of aggravated robbery and burglary, 1 count of theft, 1 count of tampering with evidence, 1 count of safecracking, and 1 count of abuse of a corpse.
That the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the aggravating circumstance outweighs the mitigating factor. Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Myers on the charge of aggravated murder.
Following his sentencing hearing, Myers showed no emotion but admitted to his horrible mistake and asked for his life to be spared. He also told the jury that killing him won't fix anything and that he wouldn't feel anything. Myers' sentencing caused some media uproar, as his accomplice Mosley received a life sentence without parole due to a plea bargain despite being the one who pulled out a knife and made the first stab. Myers, who is now 29, is currently imprisoned at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution, while Mosley is housed at the Ross Correctional Institution. Austin Myers may have stayed stone-faced, but Derek Rosa's devastation over his own actions tells a very different story. You won't want to miss what happened next.
What is the best place to stab someone? Is a small knife good for killing?
The case of Derek Rosa is a bizarre one, not just because of his age, but also the circumstances surrounding it and the manner in which he perpetrated the crime. Why a 13-year-old 8th grader would murder his own mother so gruesomely is up for debate, but his reaction in court was heartbreaking to say the least. On the night of Thursday the 12th of October 2023, 39-year-old Irina Garcia was asleep at her Hiley apartment complex at 211 West 79th Place, Florida, when she was suddenly attacked by her son, Derek, who stabbed her multiple dozen times with a small knife. Shortly after committing the murder, Rosa surprisingly called 911 to inform them of what he had done, and police officers arrived moments later to find the dead body of his mother in her bedroom next to the crib where her 14-day-old baby lay unharmed. Rosa, who had reportedly contemplated committing suicide, was swiftly arrested and taken into custody for questioning. Rosa's actions were shocking, to say the least. He had previously shown no real signs of mental illness and was said to be an honor roll student at school. When the news spread of his actions, no one could understand what could have been the motive behind it. Rosa also didn't stop at the brutal murder of his own mother. He went one step further and called an online friend to show them what he had done. He sent them 3 photos, including one where he was standing over his mother's corpse, and another of a pink-handed kitchen knife with blood on it, as well as a selfie of himself. Rosa was said to have also made several online searches to know how best to commit the stabbings. This was further evidence that the murder of his mom was premeditated. Following his arrest, Rosa was interrogated by detectives and confessed to killing his mother. 46 times he reportedly stabbed her, which meant he had continued to stab her even after she was probably dead. Video footage from the doorbell camera of the apartment also surfaced and showed events from a few hours before the murder was committed.
That moment right before and after he is accused of stabbing his mother to death.
At a pretrial hearing in December 2023, Rosa, who had dozens of supporters in court, including his maternal grandmother and his father, was questioned over his actions following his confession. Rosa was absent at his next court hearing on April 3, 2024, but he was represented by his family and tens of supporters who crowded the entrance to the court. Another hearing was set for May 2024. During his December 2023 court interrogation, Rosa became emotional as his confession to the investigators was being played in court.
The chilling interrogation video played in court. 13-year-old Derek Rosa allegedly confessing to brutally stabbing his mother, Irina Garcia, to death.
He put his head down as he appeared to begin crying, feeling devastated as the true extent of his actions dawned upon him. In reaction to the horrific confession, the judge ordered that he be held at an adult jail. Rosa pled not guilty to the charges, as he is set to be charged with first-degree murder as an adult and awaits trial for his verdict. Depending on how he is tried, he could face anywhere between 20 years and life imprisonment for his actions. Rosa, still only 14, is currently being held at the Metro West Detention Center, but his attorneys are reportedly pushing to have him moved back to a juvenile detention center, as they continue to push against the prosecutor's wishes to charge him as an adult. Investigations are still ongoing, so the fate of Rosa is left to be unknown. These intense reactions are just the beginning. The shocking stories and courtroom moments don't stop here. Stick around for more gripping cases that will leave you speechless in the next video on screen.